بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Okay, this is the second lesson on the fourth hadith in Nawawi's 40 hadith, and this was the hadith narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu regarding the subject of the creation of the son of Adam in the womb of his mother and the various stages that takes, and also the blowing of the soul into the womb and the writing of a number of affairs as it relates to that specific individual, writing of his sustenance and his lifespan, his deeds, and whether happy or wretched. So in the first lesson the Shaykh basically explained that this hadith is concerned with Al-Qadr. It contains foundations for the issue of Al-Qadr, and likewise he explained that in this hadith what is known as At-Taqdeer Al-Umri, meaning the decree as it relates to an individual and his specific lifespan, that this hadith alludes to that. It refers to the fact that the angel who is commanded to write in the scroll, that writing in that scroll which the angel performs is the taqdeer al-umri, the life, the decree for the entire life of an individual. And so then the Shaykh went on to explain the wording in the hadith. So he explained as-sadiq al-masduq, which is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who is believed, the one who is truthful, and the one who is believed. And he also explained how the three different stages of the nutfa, which is the first stage in the womb for 40 days, and then the alaqa, which is like the congealed blood clot which becomes attached to the womb, and then the mudgha, which is the flesh, like the chewed piece of flesh for the next 40 days. And then there were some issues that were discussed regarding when does the actual writing take place, because there is another hadith. So although this particular hadith, from what is apparent from it, it seems to indicate that the writing is done after 120 days, right? So after 120 days, there are other hadith, or there is another hadith which seems to indicate that it may be after 42 days. So the Shaykh then just clarified, or he explained how there's no apparent contradiction between these two hadith, and he just explained one of the main reasons, or one of the specific reasons that the scholars have used in order to explain or in order to reconcile these two hadith together. And so from that point onwards we looked at that, and this brings us then to today's lesson, inshallah, in which we will continue and finish off the remaining explanation. So the Shaykh then continues. So from the point that we left off last week, the Shaykh then raises another question, which is the blowing of the soul into the embryo. Is this connected, is it tied to the actual writing of that individual's entire life, or is it done after 120 days? Right, so this is another issue. So if you remember, the previous issue that we were discussing was, is the writing itself done after 42 days, or is it done after 120 days? That was the issue that we clarified in the previous lesson, because there seemed to be an apparent contradiction between the two hadith. And now there's another issue that arises, which is the actual blowing of the soul. Is that connect? Because if we look at these hadith, it seems to suggest that the hadith seems to suggest that it's tied to the writing, right? So, is the writing of the decree of an individual, is it done alongside the right? Is the blowing of the soul done at the same time as the writing, or is it done after 120 days, as is suggested by this particular hadith that we are discussing in Nawawi's 40 hadith? So the Shaykh says that regarding this issue, the scholars have differed, and some of the scholars, one group of scholars from the people of knowledge, they said that the blowing of the soul does not take place except after 4 months, except after 120 days, because in this particular hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said, ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح. So which means that then he, meaning Allah, sends to it an angel who then blows into it the soul. So because the word thumma has been used in Arabic, the word thumma means something that follows in succession after something else. Something that follows in succession after something else. So because the word thumma has been used in this hadith, so in other words, in the hadith it was explained that the first in the womb it is like a nutfa, then it is like an alaka for 40 days, then it is like a mudga for 40 days, that's 120 days. Then he used the word thumma, then he sends. So the word thumma, because it's been used, then that implies a succession in terms of time, an order in terms of time. So for that reason, a group from the Sahaba, and likewise Imam Ahmad, and likewise a group of scholars from his time, besides Imam Ahmad, they all were of the opinion that the soul is blown into the embryo in sometime in the 10 days after the four months. So in the 10 days after the 4 months, the soul is blown into the embryo by the angel. And some of the other scholars, they were of the opinion, they said, some other scholars from the people of knowledge, they said that the soul is blown into the womb, the embryo, after 4 months and 10 days. So after that period. Right? Some scholars said during the 10 days after 4 months, and some said after 4 months and 10 days after that point. And so the Shaykh says that regarding this, there are some narrations which have come from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum regarding this issue. And then the Shaykh says that yet another group of scholars are of the opinion that the soul has been tied to the writing. Has been tied to the writing. Right? Meaning it's connected to, so at the point at which the writing is done, it's connected directly with that. So, and the reason why they say this is because, again, if we look in the hadith, if we look in the wording of the hadith, we find that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, so he said, ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر بأربع كلمات. So which means that then, so he used the word thumma, then he sends to it an angel, so it blows into it the soul, and it is commanded with 4 words. Right? So here, the commanding with the 4 words has been tied to the blowing of the soul. So in other words, the angel has been sent and it's been commanded to do 2 things. It's been commanded to blow the soul into the embryo, and it is commanded to write 4 words, meaning the four things: the lifespan, the actions, whether happy or wretched, and so on. So in other words, the writing of the four words has been made to, or has been tied with the blowing of the soul into the embryo. And the Shaykh says likewise, the Shaykh says, so although in this hadith we find that the blowing of the soul has been mentioned before the writing of the four words, in other ahadith, when we look in other ahadith, we find that the writing itself has been mentioned before the blowing of the soul. Right? So how do we look at the situation? And the Shaykh says that the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we find that they never ever contradict each other, rather they are in perfect agreement. And this is because the truth, parts of the truth, do not contradict other parts from the truth. Rather we find that they just merely, that different parts and different texts, they just merely support and strengthen and affirm the truthfulness of the others. And so for this reason, the way that the scholars have explained these various narrations, they have said that what is mentioned in these narrations is in relation to what predominantly happens, right, in the majority of cases. This is what these ahadith are describing. This is because sometimes the soul might be blown into the embryo, but in reality we find that there's still movement in the embryo even before the time that the soul is blown into it. And so this shows that even the blowing of the soul, although in most cases it would take place after the 120 days, there are some cases in which it can occur before that, or during the 120-day period. And likewise, the issue of the writing, is it done after the blowing into the soul? And again, the Shaykh says that based upon this hadith that we've just looked at, where the writing is tied to the blowing into the soul, then the answer is that again, this hadith doesn't indicate that one occurs before the other. It just means that that they are tied to each other. That one happens around the other one, right? So they occur around each other. So it could be the case that the soul is blown into the embryo and then the writing is done shortly afterwards, or it could be the case that the writing is done and the soul is blown shortly afterwards. And the Shaykh says, however, what seems to be what seems to occur first, as is indicated by many other ahadith, is that the writing is done first and then the soul is blown into the embryo after the writing. This is what seems to be indicated by many of the other ahadith. So to summarize this part of the hadith, then the Shaykh summarizes the discussion. He says that in essence we find that there is actually a long and lengthy, detailed difference of opinion between the scholars on the issues which are raised regarding the embryo, and when the writing is done and when the soul is blown into it. But what he says, that from when we look at all of these differences of opinion, he says, and we look at that, which seems to be the most correct is that predominantly, or in the majority of cases, the soul is blown into the embryo after 120 days. Right? That's the predominant situation. However, sometimes this embryo can sometimes move, and it can have the soul blown into it even before this period. And this is something that it can be observed and witnessed in practical life, because sometimes you find that many the mother who is pregnant, and she will perceive and she will feel that that the embryo is moving, or the baby is moving, even before the 120 day period. And so this is something that can sometimes be experienced, practically speaking, by women who are pregnant. So therefore, the answer to this is that in the majority of cases, it's after 120 days when the soul is blown. And the writing, as we've already discussed in one hadith, it says that the writing is done after 42 days. So the writing could be done before that, before the blowing of the soul, as we've already explained. And the soul can be blown into the embryo or is mostly blown into the embryo after 120 days, although it can occur before the 120-day period. And the writing can occur after the 42-day period, as we've seen in other hadith. And that seems to be the summary of the entire discussion. And then the Shaykh says, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and he does not speak from his own desire, it is no less than revelation sent to him. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْحَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. And so this means that whatever has been stated by the Messenger ﷺ, all of it is revelation, all of it coincides and supports and is in agreement with other parts, and so there's nothing that, there's no kind of contradiction in any of that. Then the Messenger ﷺ said in this hadith that the angel is commanded with 4 words, and he said before that the soul is blown into it. And the Shaykh says that the soul is a created thing. The soul that is breathed into the individual, the person in the womb, that soul is a created thing. It itself is one of the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't know how this blowing occurs. We don't know how this soul becomes connected with the body. And here the soul, we find it likewise in the Quran, we find that the soul has been ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as occurs in the verse, Allah says, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, here addressing Iblis, that when I have fashioned him and I have blown into him of my soul. Now what is meant here, as we've said, that in the Quran we find that whenever Allah ascribes something to himself, it is in one of 2 ways. So sometimes we find that Allah ascribes to himself something from the creation. Right? So he might say, Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah. Or he might say, Baytullah, the house of Allah. Or Naqatullah, the she-camel of Allah. Allah ascribes it to himself. But these things, when they're ascribed to Allah, this is just merely a way of emphasizing or giving this thing nobility and status and position, and stressing the importance of that thing. Right? So the she-camel of Allah that was sent to that Allah sent. And likewise Baytullah, the house of Allah, Rasulullah. And here in this case, the ruh, the spirit or the soul, this is not referring to Allah himself, but a created thing that Allah has created, but which Allah obviously, because he created it, he owns it and it belongs to him. This is what is meant. Not that Allah has a soul or a spirit as such. This is not what is meant. So that's the first type. And the second type there is ascribed to Allah is something which is an actual characteristic of his. Like Allah might say, أَنزَلَهُ بِعِلْمِهِ, Allah sent it down with his knowledge or by his knowledge. So Allah ascribed knowledge to himself. So Allah indeed has knowledge. Or Allah might say his 2 hands. لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْ, that which I created with my own 2 hands. Or like Allah's face and other such things. So these are actual characteristics that belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and attributes. But here when Allah says to Iblis that when I fashioned, regarding Adam alayhi salam, that when I fashioned him and I have blown into him of my soul or of my spirit, this soul, the ruh, here is referring to a creature or a creation that Allah has created, and which is then blown into Adam, or the son of Adam alayhi salam. And it is not actually an attribute of Allah, the mighty and majestic. And this soul is in reality, as the Shaykh says, sirrul hayat, it's like the secret of life. And we find that when the soul is blown into the womb, you find that the attachment between the soul and the body is in fact a weak one. It's like a weak connection, because at this point the soul hasn't earned anything, hasn't done anything, hasn't acquired anything, right? In terms of obviously deeds and actions, and so it hasn't actually earned anything, and hasn't actually become strengthened at this point in time. And so what happens is that every time, as time passes on, then the soul starts to acquire a stronger, the connection becomes stronger and stronger up until when the embryo or when the child is born, then it now enters a new stage and a new relationship between the soul and the body. And the Shaykh says that the scholars, when they discuss the connection between the soul and the body, they say that basically there are 4 types of connection between the soul and the body. The first stage is in the womb of the mother, and this is the first type, and this is when there's it's just like a weak type of connection, a weak attachment between the soul and the body. And we find that predominantly that the life is centered around the body itself, right? The physical body of the child in the womb. But the soul, although it's there, its attachment to the body is like a weak attachment. Why? Because these are early stages and the soul hasn't acquired anything, hasn't earned anything, there's no deeds that have been done, there's nothing of that nature, so the attachment here is like a weakish attachment. And then the second stage is in the life of this world. So when the child is born, and then we find here that in the life of this world, the life is predominantly based around the body, and the soul follows on from it, and the relationship is such between the two that the body needs the soul for it to remain alive, for it to remain in this world. Right? So the soul really is there to allow the body to function and to allow the body to remain alive, and the life is predominantly based around the body, and the soul is something that follows on from it, but it's a requirement of the body. And then the third stage is after death. Right? So when a person dies, and now we're into the stage after death, in the barzakh, and here the life is predominantly for the soul. Here this is where the life is the life for the soul, predominantly. And the body is just something that follows on from that. Right? So here the life, it's the body, but in the hereafter it will be the soul. And then the fourth type is the connection between the body and the soul after the resurrection. After everybody is resurrected in front of the Lord of the worlds on the Day of Judgment. And this connection here will be the most complete and perfect of connections and attachments. So here it will be a complete and shared life between the soul and the body together as a whole. And here the attachment will be the strongest, attachment. So after this, the Shaykh then goes on to explain that the angel is commanded with 4 words: the sustenance, as the messenger said, وَيُؤْمَرُ بِأَرْبَعِ كَلِمَاتٍ, that the angel is commanded with 4 words to write down the sustenance, or his sustenance, his lifespan, his deeds, and whether happy or whether wretched or whether happy. And the Shaykh says here, this particular writing, these things that the angel has been commanded to write, is what we call al-qadr al-umri, or al-taqdir al-umri, which is the qadr, the decree as it relates to an individual's life. And we find that the various decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there are different types. There is the al-qadr al-yawmi, the daily decree that Allah makes. There is al-qadr al-sanawi, the yearly decree that Allah makes. And likewise there is the al-qadr or al-taqdir al-umri. Okay, and this is the what is written by the, if you like, the angel prior to the birth of a child. The writing that occurs while the child is in the womb. And that's what we call al-taqdir al-umri. And likewise there is the other one, which is al-qadr as-sabiq. Al-qadr as-sabiq, and which is obviously the qadr which has been written in the preserved tablet. The preserved tablet. And this qadr which is written in the preserved tablet, then this is something that encompasses the entire creation. Right? So this writing, the writing which is in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, this encompasses the entire creation, as opposed to the Taqdeer al-Umri, which is unique for each and every individual. Right? So each individual that is born, their qadr, which is Umri, for them is unique to them. So Allah says in the Quran, the Mighty Majestic, Allah says, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. Do you not know that Allah knows what is in the heaven and the earth? Indeed, that is in a book, and indeed, that is easy for Allah. Surah Al-Hajj, Surah 22, verse 70. And likewise, Allah says, إِنَّا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَنَاهُ بِقَدَرٍ. Indeed, every single thing have we created with due measure, with determination. Surah Al-Qamar, the 54th Surah, verse 49. And likewise, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a Hadeeth, قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَقَادِيرَ الْخَلَائِقِ قبل أن يخلق السماوات والأرض ب50,000 سنة وكان عرشه على الماء. That Allah decreed the decrees of the creation before He created the seven heavens and the earth by 50,000 years. And His throne was above the water. So from this discussion then basically we understand that there is one type of taqdeer, one type of decree, which is called a taqdeer al-umri, which is the decree as it relates to a specific individual and his life. And this is only a part or a portion of the overall decree, which is written in the preserved tablet. And the Shaykh says that if we were to look at the entire decree for each and every single individual as a whole, right, so everyone's individual decree as a whole, then all of that would agree with what is found in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Right, when we consider that as a whole. And this is because the decree which is written in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, it is Am and it is Khas. Right? So in other words, that the decree which is in the preserved tablet contains the specific decrees for each and every single individual, and likewise many other affairs, many other general affairs. So what this means is that every single person and their decree for their specific life, it is a part of what is in the overall decree for the entire creation. And the Shaykh says, after understanding this in no way does it mean that a person is compelled to do whatever they do in their actions. This doesn't mean that. Just because the angel has been commanded to write 4 words, a person's sustenance and his lifespan and his deeds and whether happy or sad, or happy or wretched, then this doesn't mean that this now is ijbar, making a person or forcing a person to do whatever he's going to do. This is because the servant is not forced. All this is merely, it's just that we are being informed. It's the angel being informed to write whatever Allah has already written, in order that whatever occurs from the servant, that it is in agreement with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all that's taking place. So in other words, Allah has ordered the angel, write all of these things. Right? Male or female, wretched or happy, how long's the lifespan, what deeds, what sustenance, all of that is written. And whatever is written, it's written because it agrees with the pre-knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about that individual. And that in no way means that this individual is now forced to do the actions that he or she is going to do. There's no connection between the two, right? So just because that information is written, that doesn't mean that individual is now forced to make the choices and forced to do the actions that he or she will do. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Rather, that writing by the angel is just something that is already that's there to be in agreement with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in any case, it's not possible for anyone that even when this decree is written, it's not possible for anyone to oppose it, because it is from Allah's knowledge. And so therefore, any person about whom it is written that he or she will be wretched, and he or she will be wretched, because Allah's knowledge is something that takes effect within the creation, in the sense that Allah knows what will happen to the servants and what they will do and what the creation will be upon up until the establishment of the hour, and likewise what will happen after that. So anyway, this taqdeer, this decree which relates to each individual and his or her life, then this is really in the hands of the angel. This is something that the angel writes. And this can differ from the decree which is in the Lawhul Mahfuz somewhat. Right? So in other words, what is written by the angel whilst the person is in the womb, and what is actually in the Lawhul Mahfuz, there can be differences between the two. And this is because that which is in the Lawhul Mahfuz, that which is written in the tablet, which is from the knowledge of Allah, that can never be changed. But as for that which is written in by the angel, then that is something that can be changed. That can be changed. So something from it can be erased, and something from it can be changed. And this is because, as the Shaykh explains, that whatever Allah has written in the Lawhul Mahfuz, none of that can be erased, nor can it be changed. It can't be erased, nor can it be changed. However, all of the other types of decree, the decree, for example, which is daily, the decree which is yearly, and the decree which is umri for each individual, then these can actually be changed. These can be, these can undergo change. And then there's a verse in this regard which clarifies this, and this is a verse in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. This is Surah Ra'd, Surah 13, verse 39. He says, Allah erases whatever He wills, and He affirms whatever He wills. And with Him is the mother of the book. So Ibn Abbas, in explaining this verse, he said, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ. This means that Allah erases whatever He wills, and He affirms whatever He wills. Meaning, in the scrolls of the angels. In the scrolls of the angels. Meaning, in that which the angels write of the decree. And then Allah said, وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. But with Him is the mother of the book. And this means that with Him is the Lawhul Mahfuz, but this does not undergo any change. Okay? So, and likewise there is the hadith of the supplication of Umar radiallahu anhu, who used to say in his dua, Allahumma in kunta katabtani shaqiyan faktubni sa'idan. That, O Allah, if you have written me as a wretched person, then indeed write me as a happy person. Meaning in terms of the hereafter. And this means that whatever has been written in the scrolls of the angels, then this is what is being referred to, that this can be changed. It's not referring to that which is in the Lawhul Mahfuz, which cannot be changed. So in other words, the dua of Umar is that if it was written in the angel scroll that I would be shaqi, then change that and write for me that I will be sa'id. Right, so this shows So this shows that basically that what is in the Lawh al-Mahfuz can never be changed, but as for that which is in the scroll that the angel writes, then this can be changed, and there is a far-reaching wisdom for this. There's a purpose behind this, and this is so that the servant, he strives and he's eager and zealous for his own rectification, and so that his, that his aspiration for Allah, the Mighty Majestic, and to seek Allah, that it increases, it becomes even bigger, and it also shows that Allah knows what His servants are doing, and in terms of their dua and their hope in Allah, the Mighty Majestic, and so having this knowledge is something that allows a person to be eager and zealous and to strive and to work and to seek the ways and means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of these things which will allow a person to so that they will allow a person to be to have rectification in the hereafter. And so then the Shaykh again, he says that the four things which are written are a person's sustenance, his lifespan, his deeds, and whether happy or wretched. And again the Shaykh establishes that this doesn't mean that a person, just because these things are written, that therefore a person is forced to do whatever he will do. Rather, in the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the servant has the choice. He is given a choice, and in making his choice, in choosing his individual actions, he's not outside the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though he makes his own decisions and he makes his own actions, whatever he does, it will never be outside of whatever Allah has already decreed. And this does not mean that he has been forced to do whatever he does. There's no contradiction between that. Just because Allah knows what he will do and Allah has written what he will do, this does not mean that he is devoid of the choice to make that decision. He always makes his own decisions. And likewise, at the same time, even though he makes his own decisions, he is not the creator of his own actions. He didn't create his own action outside of the creation of Allah. Rather, it is Allah who knew what he was going to do, who wrote down what he was going to do. Allah then allowed him and gave him the ability to choose what he was going to do, and then Allah created that individual's actions as well. Allah is the creator of the actions, but the person is the chooser and the doer of his actions as well, though Allah is the creator of the actions. And this, in a nutshell, is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding Al-Qadr. There are some stray groups, some of whom who say, from the extreme of them, that Allah does not know the actions of the servant up until the servant does them. And these are the extreme Qadariyah. And then there are some who say that a person, he creates his own actions. That when a person sins or commits fornication or commits kufr or shirk, Allah never created the action, rather the servant himself created the action. And again, this is the belief of the Qadariyah, and this is incorrect. Rather, Allah is the creator of all of the actions, and the servants are the doers of those actions, and they chose willfully to do those actions. Right? That, in a nutshell, is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding Al-Qadr and the actions of the servants. And then the final part of the hadith, which is actually, the Shaykh says that this is actually the statement of Ibn Mas'ud. So at the end of the hadith there occurs, by Allah besides whom there is none worthy of worship. Indeed, one of you does actions which are the actions of the people of paradise up until there does not remain between him and between paradise except an arm's length, and then the book overtakes him, and then he does the actions of the people of the fire, and therefore he enters into it. So the Shaykh comments and says that this is because the Shaykh says regarding this, that a person, he could for the whole of his life, he could be acting in obedience, and he could be acting in obedience, and then what will happen after that is that he chooses to be wretched, meaning, he chooses to be upon disbelief or something like that. And by choosing to do so, then he is then in agreement with what the angel had written initially, that he will be shaqi. Right? So this again doesn't mean that a person has been acting all of his life, then all of a sudden he's been forced to do something which will end up in him being wretched. This doesn't mean that. It just means that this person's been obedient all of his life, and right at the very end, he chose to be upon disbelief, and by doing so, he was in agreement with what was written already, that he would choose that and that he would do that. This is what is meant. And the Shaykh says, likewise, this is like what has been said by the Salaf al-Khawatin Mirathus Sawabiq, which means that the deeds that people die upon, by which their lives are sealed, then they are just the inheritance, or if you like, the legacy of the sawabiq, meaning of that which has already been decreed previously, or what has been written by the angel. And this is why the Shaykh says that this statement of Ibn Mas'ud is something that creates a very strong type of fear in a person, a strong fear from the deed that he will end his life with. Right? That a person is fearful of he doesn't know what deed will his life end upon. He doesn't know that. And whatever has been written previously, the sawabiq, meaning those things that are written by the angel, then they just become a means. They are just a means towards the end, which is the khawatim. And so therefore a servant is always in great fear about this issue of how will he, what will his final deed be. And so this servant is in between fear and in between hoping with his Lord. And so therefore this person, he should really be, he should strive in the path of Allah, and struggle and strive in the path of Allah against his soul, and make this jihad against his soul, and he should be upon righteousness and istiqamah. He should remain firm upon obedience to Allah, because if he does that, then it is hoped for such a person that his life will be sealed with an ending which is an ending of happiness. And then the final part of the hadith, the Shaykh is still upon the same sentence, and he says, again commenting upon the same sentence, that a person can be so close, he can be so close to something, and then the book overwrites him, or the writing overtakes him, and so therefore his affair right at the very end, it could be apostasy, and refuge is from Allah. And the Shaykh says, when it is said here that a person acts with the actions of the people of paradise, then this is only what is outwardly apparent to the people. As for his heart, then Allah knows best. We don't know what's in people's hearts, and we don't know what's in the hearts of those people who eventually deviate, and then Allah causes their hearts to deviate. We don't know that. We don't know that, but we do know one thing with certainty, which is that Allah the Mighty Majestic is wise and just. He is wise and just, and He will never ever wrong anybody. In fact, it is the people who wrong their own souls, and wrong their own selves. And then at the very end, the final statement, indeed one of you does the actions of the people of the fire, up until there does not remain between him and it an arm span, and then the book overtakes him, what has been written in the book overtakes him, and so then he does the actions of the people of paradise, and so therefore he enters into it. Reported by Bukhari and Muslim. So the Shaykh says this is from the great bounty of Allah upon some of His servants, in that He allows them, or He seals their ending with a happy ending. So in other words, they die upon an action or an ending which is good. And the Shaykh says that this hadith, and likewise this statement of Ibn Mas'ud, at the end of the hadith is something that creates a severe fear from the khawati, meaning the final ending that a person will die upon. And so a person, he then, when he realizes this, he then starts to think about, well, what's already been written for me? What has been written in my scroll, in the taqdeer al-umri? It makes a person think. And so a person then starts looking back and thinking about that, and he thinks, well, he doesn't know what has been written for him. He doesn't know that, and this leads him to obviously to cry about this issue. As some of the Salaf said, "Ma abqa al-uyun, ma abqaha al-kitab as-sabiq." That the eyes have never cried. That nothing has made the eyes to cry, the likes of what the kitab as-sabiq has made the eyes to cry. Right? So the meaning that there's nothing which has made the eyes cry in a manner that the kitab as-sabiq, meaning here that which has been written for a person for his life, that which is written in his scroll, the taqdeer al-umri, that nothing has made the eyes cry, the likes of which the kitab as-sabiq has. So therefore a person, he looks, he reflects, and he wishes, he loves, if only he knew what the angel has written for him. Has the angel written that he will be wretched or happy? And if he knows that he's been written as someone who is sa'id, as happy, then he will be at ease and he will be in happiness. And if it's been written that he will be wretched, then he will, if he knows there has been written as someone who's been written as wretched, then he will strive as much as possible to do the actions of the people of paradise up until he's written as one of the pious people. Because remember, even though in the taqdeer al-umri he may be written as someone who is shaqi, he can still be written as someone who is sa'id, happy, in the lawh al-mahfuz. Right? So therefore, as we said before, that this forces a person to act, and it gives him the impetus and the motive to act and to do righteous actions, and so on and so forth. However, Allah the Mighty and Majestic, He's hidden this knowledge from us. Allah hasn't given us this knowledge as to whether we are written as sa'id or shaqi in this taqdeer al-umri. Allah has hidden that from us for a reason, for a purpose, from His wisdom. And this is so that people remain serious and strive to do their actions. Right? This is the reason why. And so that the people, they compete with each other in bir and taqwa, and so therefore the one who is eager and the one who just wastes his time, that they're not considered to be the same. And so that the one who is a mujahid, who strives and struggles against his own soul, and who struggles against his enemy, which is Iblis, that he is not treated the same as the one who is just a waster and who follows his own soul, he follows his own desire. So ma abqa al-uyun ma abqaha al-kitab as-sabiq, that nothing has made the eyes to cry, the likes of which the kitab as-sabiq has made the eyes to cry. So, and then again the Shaykh says, another statement made by the Salaf is qulubul abrar mu'allaqatun bil khawatim, that the hearts of the pious people are attached to the khawatim. They say, how will our ending be sealed? وقلوب السابقين أو المقربين معلقة بالسوابق يقولون ماذا سبق لنا. But as for the hearts of the sabiqeen, meaning those who are foremost in good deeds and who are closest to Allah, their hearts are attached to the sawabiq, meaning their hearts, what they think of is what has already been written for them in that scroll. And they say, what has already been written for us? And that's what they think, and that's what they say. So the Shaykh says that this statement here is an example of the very severe fear that you find in the hearts of the people of Iman, the people of faith. And when they have this type of fear, and when they have this type of fear, this doesn't mean that that this person is hesitant in obedience because they don't know what's been written for them. This doesn't mean that. This means that this fear that they have and they don't know what's been written for them is something that spurs them and motivates them to be very, very firm and resolute in making preparations to meet Allah the Mighty and Majestic. And so therefore, all of this shows and indicates that having Iman in Al-Qadr, as has been indicated by this hadith, that it has great and mighty benefits and fruits in helping a person to act and to have certainty and in rectifying the hearts of the servants. Right? This is one of the benefits of the fruits of believing in Al-Qadr and knowing these affairs and these issues that are mentioned in this hadith. So therefore, the pious people are the ones who believe in Al-Qadr, and as for the wasters, the people who waste their time and who, the ones who find fault with Al-Qadr, that they are the ones who will waste their lives and end up in ruin. And each one amongst them, they all have their own ranks and degrees with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the blessing and the favor. And so in other words, meaning that there are those who are the muqarribeen and sabiqeen, who are the closest to Allah. There are those who are the ashabul yameen, the people of the right hand. And there are those who are the people of wretchedness, who have levels and degrees in the hellfire. And this is how it is. And so we seek refuge in Allah from abandonment by Him. And this is the end of the explanation of the hadith. And this concludes today's lesson. And so inshallah we'll stop our lesson today here, and then we'll continue in the next lesson inshallah ta'ala with hadith number 5, which is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha regarding the completion of Islam and how anyone attempting to introduce something new to Islam will not have it accepted, rather it will be rejected. So we'll look at this hadith inshallah ta'ala in the next lesson. So this concludes our lesson for today inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.